and cry foul and claim that it's being targeted by the region, it's being rejected because of its democracy, it's rejected because of its being as an extension of the Western civilization in that part of the world. They can make any claims they like. But if everybody hates you, there is a problem with you. So you need to rethink why everybody around you hates you, why everybody says that you're wrong. The problem with the Israelis, they think that the whole world is revolving around them. Even in Europe, now if you go to Europe and if you look at any polls that are taken there, you'll find that Israel is ranked one of the threats that one of the sources of that threatened the international peace and the international law. So Israel has a problem with almost every single nation, unfortunately, except here in the US, because our media does not tell us the truth as it is. We don't hear the truth as the rest of the world is hearing the truth. During the 2012 attacks on Gaza, the American media were talking about these preemptive missiles that are rockets that are being launched from Gaza. But no one is talking about Gaza is being under embargo, under sanction. Gaza is being denied of food, denied of clean water, fresh water. The Gazan people are being imprisoned in a in the largest, maybe call it open-ended prison. No one is talking here in our media about the official report that was issued by IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, that they were calculating the calories that the Palestinian people in Gaza are allowed to consume on a daily basis. No one is talking about this. No one is talking about the cruelty that is taking place against the Gazan people and the Gaza and the Palestinian people at large. So we only hear about these preemptive missiles or rockets that are being launched from Gaza, but no one is talking about one missile, from Israeli missile, that is made in America that kills dozens of Palestinians, but that is a civilized killing. But these hundreds of rockets that are being sent into southern Israel that barely even injures one single Israeli citizen are terrorist attacks. Well, if we want to be fair, let's call them all terrorist attacks. If we want to be fair, let's say that Gaza is still under occupation. Israel never really left Gaza. The Gazan people are denied the right of movement, denied to eat, denied to buy their own food, denied to travel, denied to visit their own children and their own sons in the Israeli prisons. They're denied to import medicine. So when we talk about Israel, Israel is rejected by the entire region because of its policies. Also, Israel is rejected because it's seen as a competitor. Israel, also there is a competition between countries like Egypt, Turkey, Iran, and Syria with Israel over influence. All of these countries are major countries. So it's not only because of their occupation of Palestine, it is also because they're war. I mean, there is a competition between Egypt and Iran today, between Iran and Turkey today, because they're all regional powers. But the problem with Israel is that it's always spared in our media here. They're always spared while the rest of the world is hearing and seeing a different narrative from the narrative that we're seeing here in the United States in the mainstream media. Now, the third point that I want to talk about is a question whether the new incubator could pave the way for the emergence of a fourth Palestinian leadership or a fourth generation of the Palestinian leadership. Why am I saying a fourth generation? Now, there is a wave of change in the Middle East. There is a wave of change. I just came from the Middle East. I visited Jordan, Doha, I visited Morocco, and you can see the sentiments in the Middle East. Now, I studied in Morocco, I graduated from Morocco, and I lived under the tyranny of King Hassan II. I lived in Morocco when no person could say a word, could criticize the king. I lived in Morocco when people were so oppressed and were so fearful to speak or to participate or to become politically active. Now Morocco is different. It's not because the new king is generous, it's because the people demanded it. I went to Jordan. Same thing in Jordan. I grew up in Jordan. And I attended a demonstration against the king. And people were chanting that freedom is from God, not from the king. Because in Jordan, everything that comes to you is a gift from the king. So if he allows elections, it is a gift from the king. If he allows you to breathe, it is a gift from the king. If he allows you to go and be treated in a hospital at the expense of the state, it is a gift from the king. That's what we call it, makruma malakiyya. It is a gift from the king. Now people are saying, enough is enough. I mean, Obama would wish to have the same authority that the king in Jordan or Morocco or Mubarak had before. Obama would wish to have the same authority to just dissolve the Congress. I mean, we have parliaments. They don't have any meaning. It's not only that the elections are rigged, but even if they will show any signs of defiance to the regime, they will be dissolved. So now when you go to the Middle East, you see a new sentiment, you see a new generation. A generation that believes that change is a right. Is a right. And they're acting accordingly. So Palestine is not far from the waves of change in the Middle East. And I'm saying the fourth generation of leadership because in 1948, we had the first leadership of all Palestine government. That was the first official Palestinian leadership. All Palestine government, 1948, was created under the Arab League, under Abdel Halim Abdel Baqi. So, and it was supported by the Egyptian regime at that time. In 1967, the creation of the PLO. Also, it was the decision of Jamal Abdel Nasser, the former Israeli Egyptian president. In 1968, we had the third generation. When Abdel Nasser, when the Arabs were defeated in 1967, in the June 1967 war, so Abdel Nasser understood that the Arab regimes cannot fight Israel, so he wanted to allow the Palestinian factions to fight Israel, so he allowed the Palestinian factions under the Fatah movement to take over the PLO. Now we still live under the same leadership that came into power in the Palestinian arena since 1968. Abbas is an extension of that leadership. But now with the new wave in the Arab world, we're seeing a different dynamics. Now there are calls to have elections for the Palestinian National Council. So it's no longer a Fatah-dominated Palestinian arena. Even Fatah is not the only force on the ground. We've seen the rise of Hamas, we've seen the rise of Mustafa al-Barghouthi, the Palestinian Initiative, we've seen the rise of the Islamic Jihad, we've seen the rise of other groups that are not organized. But now they're demanding to be treated equally and to have the right as well, to the right to be included in the Palestinian strategical decisions. So it's no longer the decision of the PLO under its current status. It's no longer the decision of the Palestinian National Authority, if you will accept this terminology that it represents all of the Palestinians. It is now the decision of the Palestinian people who have the right to say whether we accept this or not. Now we've seen in the recent days that few Arab foreign ministers came to Washington, met with Secretary Kerry, and they accepted the notion of land swap. Now, again, the Arab officials could say whatever they want to say, but it is on the ground that things are determined. It is up to the Palestinian people to accept and not to accept. The Arabs have introduced their Arab initiative in 2002. It never advanced because, not only because of the Palestinians, the Israelis rejected it. Now the Palestinians are also saying that we have legitimate aspirations, and these legitimate aspirations need to be met. According to the international resolutions, according to the American official stand, the 1967 land in its entirety is unoccupied land. All of the settlements in the 1967 land are illegal according to our official position here. Regardless of what President Obama is saying because of political pressure, regardless of the strength and the influence of the Israeli lobby in this country. But again, this is the official position so far. But unfortunately, because we gave in here for the political pressure of AIPAC and the other Zionist organizations, we're not being able, I'm talking here as America, to advance what is in our national interest. And I will tell you why I'm saying it's in our national interest. I will read you a quotation from President Obama in his speech in May 2011. Do you remember when Netanyahu came to this country and he addressed Congress? So Obama hastened and he had a speech just a few days before Netanyahu's speech, and one of the things that he said, a region undergoing profound challenges will lead to populism in which millions of people, not just a few leaders, must believe peace is possible. The international community is tired of an endless process that never produces an outcome. We know that when General Petraeus was the head of sitcom, when he went and testified before the the Senate Armed Forces Committee, that the Israeli policies, this was back in 2010, that the Israeli policies are hurting the American national interests in the Middle East. So we know that this is a consensus within the different branches of our government. But again, because of the pressure of AIPAC and the likes and its likes, unfortunately we cannot pursue and we cannot follow up on our own assessment as a nation. And this is one of the problems that we are witnessing now. Now the fourth point, this will lead me to the fourth point, which is about which has to do with the American approach towards the region. Now when we talk about the United States, I talked about the different dynamics in the Middle East, different dynamics in the Palestinian arena, now and Israel trying to redefine its role in the Middle East. Also, there are changes in the United States. America today is not the same America 10 years ago. The America that Obama inherited is not the same America that President Bush inherited in 2001. It is a different America. We know how bad the economy is. We know the national debt of the United States. We know the situation here. And now we're seeing a new president who's saying that he's not going to send tens of thousands of soldiers to any part of the world unless he has to, unless the American national interest or America is being threatened. So we're seeing a new dynamics, a new America, because America cannot afford to go from one war to another war. I will read you two quotations from President Obama. The first one was at the West Point Academy in December 2009 when he decided to send more soldiers to Afghanistan. What he said in that speech, he said, as a president, I refuse to set goals that go beyond our responsibility, our means, or our interests, and must weigh all of the challenges that our nation faces. I don't have the luxury of committing to just one. In another speech, again before the same academy, West Point Academy, in May 2010, he says, at no time in human history has a nation of diminished economy vitality maintained its military and political primacy. It also cannot fall on America's shoulders alone. Our adversaries would like to see America sap its strength by overextending our power. Why? Because under the Bush administration, America was consumed in Iraq, the war of choice, according to President Obama in his speech in June 2009 in Cairo. It is a war of choice. It bankrupted or pushed America on the brinks of bankruptcy, and it caused America a lot of problems. America was drawn into a street fights, and the American military started to lose one of its major roles of being a combat force instead of a security forces. So the United States did suffer because of the invasion of Iraq, the ill-planned invasion of Iraq. So now we understand and we see the consequences. Our national debt is approaching the $17 trillion. $17 trillion, this is our national debt. And America cannot pay it, and we have to keep borrowing. And borrowing from whom? Mainly from China, right? And half of our trade is with Asia, with Eastern Asia, where China is. So America is losing its primacy in Eastern Asia, in the Pacific Asia. China is advancing politically, militarily, and the United States cannot contain China because of its involvement at the time in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now we're out of Iraq. The new national defense strategy that was declared in March 2012 now will focus on Pacific Asia, where America will attempt to contain China. That is the real challenge for the United States in the Pacific Asia. So the Middle East, by extension, becomes a headache instead of being a cancer. The real cancer for the American foreign policy, in Pacific Asia. The Middle East became a headache. A headache, you treat it with what? With what? With Advil. With Advil, you don't need to go through a chemotherapy for cancer. The cancer is in another part. So now this is the focus of the United States. That's one of the reasons why the United States was confused when the Arab Spring started. They didn't know how to deal with it. They did not anticipate it. They didn't know how to deal with it. They tried to ride the wave. It didn't work for us. Now, after the Arab Spring hit the wall in Syria, Syria became, or is expected to be the graveyard for the Arab Spring and to the revolutions. And I'm not going to talk about the American calculations in Syria, but Syria now is potentially will be treated or will be dealt with as a graveyard for the Arab Springs with the concession of with the acceptance of the United States. And we've seen the recent agreement between the United States and Russia. President Obama, who demanded that Bashar al-Assad has to leave office, now they're saying, bring them all together, let them meet the opposition with the representatives from the Bashar regime, the Assad regime, and if they reach an agreement, if they reach a settlement, we will accept it. So now we see a change in the American official position. Why? Because Israel is not happy that the changes are taking place in the Arab world. They couldn't stop it in Egypt, they were taken by surprise. They couldn't stop it in Libya, they were taken by surprise. They couldn't stop it in Tunisia and Yemen, they were taken by surprise. Now in Syria, they had the time to rethink their whole position, and they had the chance to try to contain the Arab regime, the Arab revolution. So now, instead of being confused about in our dealing with the Arab revolutions, now we're trying to contain the Arab revolutions, and we're using Syria as the example there, that to warn Arabs that if you want change, you will see the bloodshed that you've seen now in Syria. Now, I will get to the last point, which is Israel's dilemma. Now, I said the Middle East is changing. The United States is changing. Israel is changing. The Palestinian people are changing. Israel is not capable anymore to defeat or to inflict a defeat on the Palestinian people. Israel can destroy, can kill, can commit war crimes, can demolish, can kill infants, but it cannot defeat the will of the Palestinian people. Israel failed in 2006 in Lebanon. Israel failed in 2008, 2009 in Gaza. And Israel failed yet again in November 2012 in Gaza again. So Israel cannot predetermine the outcome of a war, because Israel is not fighting traditional armies. It's fighting rebels and groups who are capable of taking big hits without declaring surrender. They're not declaring surrender. They're not calling it off. They're still standing tall. They're still fighting, defending themselves. Whether you want to call them terrorists or resistant groups, call them whatever you want to call them. But Israel is unable to defeat Gaza. Israel is unable to defeat the will of the Palestinian people. So Israel has a dilemma, and this dilemma is an existential dilemma. And I'm saying an existential dilemma because the entire Middle East could fall into chaos. The entire Middle East could explode. When I was in Jordan, I was surprised of the tension in Jordan and in other Arab countries. People could explore